Karl Anthony Towns tears his ACL. Or, I'm sorry, whoa. Back up. I'm not putting that on anybody. Knock on wood. I don't wish that on anybody. Let me back up. That was wrong. I was wrong. Karl Anthony Towns tears his meniscus. There you go. Not the ACL, the meniscus. And there potentially, let's say, is a pathway for him to come back and play. Apparently it's not a completely torn meniscus. Part of the meniscus is torn, so whether surgery, rehab, I'm not too sure what has to happen, but there is a path, whether confident or not, there is a path where he could possibly play in the playoffs. Joel Embiid pretty much suffered the same injury. Joel Embiid, who was the leading candidate for the MVP, who was obviously the best player on the 76ers and gave them the best shot to advance in the playoffs and to potentially play for an NBA championship, that Joel Embiid suffered pretty much the same injury as Karl Anthony Towns. Now, obviously, the difference is this Karl Anthony Towns one just happened. The Joel Embiid one happened a couple weeks ago. And the reason why I started this episode saying that I didn't want to come off as a hypocrite and I'm going to explain myself is, again, I'm not 100% sure if I said it on the podcast, but I know that I for sure said it either, again, on the podcast, talking to friends, talking to people outside the podcast. But I shared the sentiment that I don't think Joel Embiid should come back this year. I think he should, with him tearing the meniscus, I think he should just, even if there is a hope to come back, I think he should just shut it down this year. And I don't feel the same way for Karl Anthony Towns. Let me explain. You see, not only am I looking at the history of both players, but I'm looking at the current circumstances for both players. While Karl Anthony Towns has been injured in his career, he doesn't have an extensive history of injury that Joel Embiid does. And while, yes, Karl Anthony Towns is a bigger human being, he is not as big as Joel Embiid is. Remember, Joel Embiid came into the NBA with injury history. In fact, I believe he missed his first season due to injury. So when you hear about a player as big and as important to his team as Joel Embiid, and it's a lower body injury, it's a meniscus, there's always going to be cause for concern for me because you're already lugging around that much weight and you're already a 7-foot human being with an injury history. I don't want you to rush yourself back, force yourself back, and ultimately could potentially further damage your meniscus, or you can cause a bigger injury or a more serious injury. Now, that's not me saying that Karl Anthony Towns isn't important. In fact, one of the biggest reasons why I'm saying that both of these are different is because of how important Karl Anthony Towns is to the Minnesota Timberwolves. When Joel Embiid injured tore his meniscus, I said, not only is that an end for his MVP campaign this year, but the 76ers have absolutely no shot of advancing in the playoffs without Joel Embiid. And while They have put up a valiant effort without him. Tyrese Maxey has been really good in the number one spot. Tobias Harris has been playing well. Paul Reed has been playing good. Buddy Hield has been playing good. Kelly Oubre has been playing good. I think that the team has stepped up in Joel Embiid's absence, but they still have looked night and day compared to when Joel Embiid was on the court. I mean, I think when Joel Embiid went out, they were 4th or 5th seed. Right now, I believe they're 7th or 8th. So that should show you, even in this regular season, that they are going to, it's going to be a very, very tall uphill battle for the Philadelphia 76ers to compete in the playoffs without Joel Embiid. And selfishly, I don't want to legacy is important at the end of your career. Obviously, during your career, you build up your legacy, but the legacy is important at the end of it. And the last thing that I want to do, and the last thing that I think Joel Embiid wants and Joel Embiid's camp wants, and honestly the 76ers want, is Joel Embiid to rush himself back, play in the playoffs, and get bounced out the first or second round. Seeing as though he has never been to the conference finals. That's just going to be yet another blemish. And not only do I think he's going to come back not in shape, and I'm not saying like a fat thing, I'm saying the only way you can get in basketball shape is to play basketball. And for someone that has a meniscus tear, that's probably not even doing much walking right now, I doubt he is in basketball shape. Not saying he can't walk, but I'm sure he's not doing full 5-on-5 drills. That wouldn't be smart, in my opinion, if you're doing that. That is Joel Embiid. Again, I don't think with the current state that Joel Embiid would be in if he came back to the team, I don't think that the 76ers have a shot of advancing. So not only do you lose your shot of winning an MVP because you've missed the so much time that you do not hit that threshold with the new NBA PA and the NBA has agreed to. You're not getting the MVP. You're not getting a pay bonus because you won an MVP. And to me, you have no shot of advancing in the playoffs. So I just don't feel like this is the smartest decision for himself to come back this year. I said all that to say, and why people could possibly look at me as a hypocrite in this sense, I feel the complete opposite for Karl Anthony Towns. You see, while Karl Anthony Towns is not the most important or the best player on the Minnesota Timberwolves, best and believe the Minnesota Timberwolves cannot advance or will not advance in the playoffs if Karl Anthony Towns is not there. Not only are you losing a perennial scorer, but you're losing your second best player. And to put that into perspective, Anthony Edwards is great. There's obviously debate that Anthony Edwards could possibly be the face of the league when obviously, 4, 5, 6 years from now. Yet and still, Karl Anthony Towns is the one that had 62 or 63 points this year in a game. Albeit they lost, but still. The Minnesota Timberwolves find themselves in a very rare situation for them. And that is they are currently the number 1 seed in the West. And they have earned the number 1 seed in the West. Again, contrast to the 76ers. The 76ers with Joel Embiid was, I think, the 4th or 5th seed. Currently, as we speak, the Minnesota Timberwolves are the number 1 seed in the West. And the Minnesota Timberwolves don't have an extensive history of playoff success. Yes, they've had great players like, Kevin Garnett, Stephon Marbury. They've had Kevin Love, Sam Cassell. They've had an extensive list of good players, but they haven't really found themselves in a good position going into the playoffs since Kevin Garnett honestly was there. And again, remember, I don't care how good Anthony Edwards is, and this is honestly no slight to him, but even with him being the best player, there is no shot of them advancing in the playoffs without Karl Anthony Towns. So I feel because Minnesota doesn't really find themselves, again, last year they were the number 8th seed. So to go from that to number 1, they don't really, again, you need to capitalize on these moments because these moments don't happen that much for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So if Karl Anthony Towns has a shot to come back, mind you, last episode I talked about contenders or pretenders, and I said that the youth part, because this team is so young, while they do have veterans, the Minnesota Timberwolves is led by youth. And because of that, it scares me a little bit as far as crowning them contenders. However, because they are one of, if not the best defense in basketball, that is why I put them in the contenders list. On top of that, you have the home court advantage because you're the number 1 seed. Again, you can throw all that out the window with Karl Anthony Towns not being there. With Karl Anthony Towns, the Minnesota Timberwolves have a shot to win an NBA championship. Without Karl Anthony Towns, I don't see them. It doesn't matter who they play in the first round. It does matter. But if they play like a Golden State or if they play like a Los Angeles Lakers, without Karl Anthony Towns, I do not see them advancing past round 1. And Karl Anthony Towns doesn't have an MVP to lose. Karl Anthony Towns doesn't have millions upon millions to lose, I don't believe. And he has so much more to gain because, again, I feel if Joel Embiid comes back, because there's such an uphill climb in the East, whether we talk about the Boston Celtics, whether we talk about the we talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, it's going to be a tough road, especially on someone that has torn the meniscus and has been out as long as Joel Embiid. Now, this could all be mute, and Karl Anthony Towns can come out and not be able to come back. I understand. Obviously, I think that these players need to do what's best for them. If I'm just speaking on what's best for Karl Anthony Towns, I would not come back. If we're just speaking on what's best for the player, which I'm always going to champion what's best for the player, Karl Anthony Towns should not come back, especially when you're a big man that has a lower body injury. You want the maximum amount of rest time, whether that is, and I understand what I just said, and I still stand on what I just said, but I'm looking at a player's perspective. Now, if we're talking about, potential to win a championship and helping your team out perspective, I for sure would come back if I'm Karl Anthony Towns. Not as much for Joel Embiid because I just don't feel, with the time it's going to take for Joel Embiid to get back into basketball shape, which is going to have to be in the playoffs. I don't see it happening. But I do ultimately wish the best for both Karl Anthony Towns and Joel Embiid both of them suffering a torn meniscus. Not completely torn, but a torn meniscus. I just hope for a speedy recovery for both. Both of them are very important for the game. Oh man, you stayed to the end of the video. I appreciate you. If you like what you saw, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss any content from your boy. You can also go back and watch past episodes, past clips, and don't forget that the Unpopular Podcast, new episodes drop every Wednesday and Saturday. Appreciate you.